Go. Here we go. Oh. Welcome to round three. Yeah, I think round three, round four for this digital tonal illustration, Project 3, as it's sometimes known. I've started to call it The Dig, is what I'm going to call this illustration. So in the previous video, we went through and we talked a lot about how to be able to set up your compositions, how when you are creating these compositions, it is a living, breathing conversation that you are having with your canvas, with the story that you want to tell. I think in the last video, if I proved anything, I showed that you don't always get it right the first time. And so oftentimes, I think when we're just starting off with digital illustration, we draw the first thing that comes to our minds and then we don't iterate. And the importance of getting these compositions looking good at these early stages and getting things positioned and scaled the way that you want them to is so important, because the concept behind this is fail fast, right? We want to make sure that our proportions are working, that we have a good guidebook to be able to move forward with within our paintings. So since last time we looked at this one, I've done a little bit more work on it. In the previous video, this hand holding the dagger, there was just something off about that hand. And I thought about it and I looked at it and I still couldn't figure it out. Definitely wasn't right. So what I ended up doing was taking a photograph of myself holding a Coca-Cola bottle upside down, which gave me the general hand position that I needed. And this is, in fact, the right position for the hand. Fingers were on the wrong side, had to flip it, and now we've got the hand in the right position going down. I've also updated the dagger. I thought it was kind of fun to make it look like it has a little UFO up on top of it. We'll be color blocking all this stuff in tonight and showing you how I want to go through, so that I can do maximum edits and make this dagger look really clean, but still made out of stone and make it look old as well, but just a clean paint job on it as we move forward. Next thing that I went through and did on this illustration is we've got all our mannequin people down here. So this is a good starting point for the characters. I've got the general poses that are roughed in, but for a developed sketch, this is not enough information for me to go in and start painting. I need to, at this sketching stage, figure out what these characters are wearing, where they're looking, what their faces look like. I want to put in and figure out as much thought as I possibly can with these paintings before I go into the serious painting phase within the sketch phase. And even at that first round, right, I'm thinking about, I know the lighting is going to come in through this window and what elements, inside here help to tell the story of what this building is that we're looking into, right? I think that the speakers on the outside give us the idea that electricity exists here, that, they're giving big announcements. This is sort of the home base for this dig operation that they have going on. So I went back through and I started drawing all of my characters. I did it in red first, so I started dropping down the figure drawings that were there before. Just turned down the opacity on them and then created a new layer over top and just slowly went through and did some more work to really kind of hash out how the fingers were going to work, what the facial expressions were going to look like, where the eyes are at. A lot of these fellas have got awesome beards. I'm 40 years old, still can't grow a beard, and then really figuring out what this guy was going to look like as well. So he's got kind of a manic look inside of his eyes, got enough of his nose built out there, got the rolls in the neck. What is his clothing going to look like? Where are the wrinkles, the main wrinkles going to be at within the clothing? And I'm really trying to do that for each one of these characters moving through here. I also went through and really refined this character out and figured out what he was going to be wearing. He's got that like 1940s, 1950s, really high-waisted pants going on as he's starting to stand up. And then I just added a color overlay over the top of all that stuff so that now we can really see it. There he is. So from without this, that's what I had sketched there before. Whew, boy. All right. That first sketch, there's that chicken wire, really did a good job of letting me figure out what the general pose is going to be on the character. And now that second sketch is just a whole nother level of detail. And while you're having the conversations with your paintings and with your sketch, you get to, come up with other new kind of ideas to tell the audience a little bit about who this person is, right? So if this guy is the second in command, he's a little bit more disheveled. Maybe he's dealing with the day-to-day ground level operations, so he's a little bit more stressed out. So his shirt isn't quite tucked in all the way. And yeah, now we can see a whole lot of the characters' expressions. Had to figure out what their MacGuffin was going to be that they were pulling up out of the ground, and I decided just to do some type of rune type thing there. Refine the knife, and we're in a pretty good position. So at this stage, I felt that I had a good enough grasp on my sketch to begin the painting. Here's what the next steps look like. I took all my sketch layers, combined them into a folder, and just left them up there. Then I'm going to turn down my entire sketch a whole lot to like 42% so that I can work behind it and focus on my painting, right? Because we're not using the line work. We're going sans without lines on this project. And my recommendation for you guys in the second video that we did when we talked about using and working heavily from your reference images, it's all about finding the middle tone within these paintings. My next insight here is that as you start to shade in these paintings and finding that middle tone and doing your color blocking, is that you start from the very back of your painting, as far back as you can possibly see, and then work your way forward towards the foreground, making decisions along the way. Why do people do this? I don't know. If you watch Bob Ross, he always starts with the sky, right? Then he goes to the mountains, and then he works his way to the foreground. And it's just a darn good approach because I think it helps you sort of settle into the painting. You're making a lot of micro decisions in that background space about what the line weight, if you're going to use texture, how much texture you're going to do. You're sort of slowly introducing the ingredients, and it's sort of an abstracted stomping ground before you get into the more precise details of the middle ground and the foreground. It's abstract expressionism is what most of these backgrounds really are. So in the beginning, I started looking at my reference image over here on the left-hand side, which, again, fairly certain this is a 3D render. So many 3D renders out there. Always better to use a digital illustration as your example rather than a 3D render. But this one works for me because it's got enough distance in it. It's also got sort of the lighting that I'm looking for within my piece. And then within, this is the extreme foreground, but I can use a similar lighting in my piece for the middle ground and the big arms sticking up as well. And so I also really like the sky too. The fact that it's got these little super subtle cloud forms that are going on in black and white here. I think these are just so cool looking, and I've never painted anything like this before. Let's look, sorry, we're going to get to me actually painting here in a sec, I swear. But so oftentimes I feel like I'm asking students or folks when they're doing their digital paintings to really study these illustrations. And sometimes I feel like maybe your eyes aren't seeing everything that's going on. And so I'm going to talk you through the way that my eyes see this thing, right? So I appreciate all the different details, and I'm really studying with my eyedropper, right? This is helping me see what the colors really are. To me, when I look at this thing, this color right here, right in between the two pieces of car or whatever that is, the mangled metal object, this color and the one on the right-hand side look about the same, even though it's actually brighter. Well, just a little brighter there. But as I start to move over further, well, it's still about the same color. That color drops drastically. So visually, the jump between what is the brightest point within this background and just a subtle movement over to sort of the middle gray is a pretty substantial jump on the color wheel. So from here to here, big jump from here to here. From one side of the left mangled vehicle to the other is a big jump, even though we've got all this over here, which is an even larger jump. So as I'm doing this, I want to figure out how to be able to build in my gradient and my colors successfully within my background, that I'm pulling the tones and the values from this reference image. This is my guide, my compass through the desert. So over here on the right-hand side, we'll talk about, remember, we've got our sketches up at the very top. I'll turn that red just so that you can see it a little bit easier. Got a red sketch layer all in one folder for my developed sketch. And then down here, I've got my layers pulled apart. We're going to see this painting start to come together in just a moment. The blue layer down here is my sky layer. I want to keep it back here so we're seeing it pulled out. All right, so I've got my sky layer, and then I've got my mountains are going to be all these orange layers. And the mountains bring me right up to the pit, the dig site, where the arm is sticking up out of. I have not done the arm yet. I sort of jumped ahead. I was running out of steam. It had been a long day yesterday when I was painting. And I jumped ahead to the cabin within the foreground. And I also went ahead and painted the cabin within the foreground because I wanted that to help inform my decisions for my color choices within the middle ground. I knew that when I created this idea in my head that there was going to be a large contrast after seeing the reference image that I'm using, a large contrast between the right-hand side of the canvas, which is going to be very dark, and then a much brighter left-hand side of the canvas. And you don't really get that from this sketch, right? This is one of those things. If anyone's ever sat down and watched you draw something before, they're like, wow, I don't know how you do that. Well, it's because as artists, we've got the whole picture in our heads already, right? And we know where this thing is going. So I knew this was going to compositionally be something that I needed to solve for. Anywho, here's my sky. Keep in mind, I've got a cabin over here on the right-hand side that's going to get painted in. What's important here for me is that I'm starting to get some of those micro cloud shapes that I saw within my reference, and I'm pulling my colors much, much brighter down at the bottom. And I've also got that similar gradient that's occurring over here on the left-hand side. I built the gradient at the very end with the burn tool, but we're getting some really, really nice, just sort of slightly heavier in an overcast day, gray clouds that are starting to build up. And I think that it looks really, really nice there. I'm excited about it, right? Now, once I've worked through my sky and I feel like I've battled my clouds enough and feel like I've got them kind of working pretty good and they're working in conjunction with how I know I'm going to be rendering around this hand in this dagger, right? I'm still using the sky to draw the viewer's attention in towards this dagger and get us down to the main left-hand side. This is an interesting composition, right? We've got really high contrast with the hand lifting up over the horizon line. We've got a whole bunch of noise that's going on with the people down below the dagger. We've got a whole nother composition over the right-hand side of the guy getting up out of his chair. We'll see that later on. So visually, how this is pulling us through is sort of a big triangle is what's going on here. We're making a big triangle within this painting. And yeah, so then I start painting in the mountains. Let's keep in mind, if y'all will, for a second. This is my sketch back here. That's still there. And so I've got some really far off mountains. I've got some mountains that are a little bit closer, and then some other hills that are even closer than that. So this is my super far off mountains. This is my mountain recommendation to you guys. It took me a long time to figure this out. Almost all mountains look better with sort of some fog of war down at the bottom of them. So you can see the way that this mountain down at the base of itself, the really far off mountains, have got a gradient that gets darker as it goes to the top. If you don't really study paintings and you're just trying to paint mountains out of your head, you will never catch this. It's not intuitive. It's not something that you think of if you aren't looking at reference images or if you aren't really studying other people's paintings, but almost all mountains look better with that gradient running up towards the top. Now, at this stage, and I think this happens with beginning digital artists as well, is that you can start to fall in love with every little new decision that you're making within your painting, or you can get too stuck with things. You say, oh no, that's not exactly right. And then suddenly you start barreling yourself down into the pixel, you start zooming in. While I'm painting all this stuff, I'm staying this far back on my canvas. I'm not getting close in with anything that I'm doing. I'm remaining really, really pulled back and far away. This is not the time for me to go in and get into the details yet. I just need to work loosely through each layer. Next layer. So from there, I get my silhouettes of my mountains going in. Um, far off mountain silhouettes, sometimes you're trying to recreate a camera, you might make them a little bit more blurry. Um, they can be a little fuzzy, a little fuzzy. They don't have to be like razor sharp like the things within the foreground. But with this mountainscape here, as things get further away, I'm lightening it just a little bit in the middle. I don't know if you can see that, but there's a little bit of a gradient that's occurring right in the middle of those mountains. And now I'm going to start adding some more details over the top of them. Right, so this is my base layer for those mountains. And then on top of that, I go in and I'm going to start painting just a little bit of snow going on there. I know I've got some other stuff that I'm going to add. From there, I'm finally getting into my shadow layer within these mountains. And again, all this information here, notice how expressive my brush work is. I've got a textured brush that I'm using, but I'm also going through and using the smudge tool just a little bit, just little flicks of the smudge tool just to smear the paint and smooth it out here and there. And it starts to have a really expressive energy to the line work, right? This is coming from project 2, the line work project, where I still want to really focus in on having expressive lines that I'm creating and a good sense of energy with my brushwork. All of that I'm totally stealing from these mountains right over here on the left-hand side. Right, so all my colors I'm picking from this little hill over on the left-hand side. And you can see that within this hillscape as well, the mountains are getting darker as we move over to the right-hand side, lighter as we move more towards the center. So I'm using the exact same stuff from my reference image and really, really studying the heck out of it to be able to create this scene. Now, there's some big blobs over here on the right-hand side that aren't finished. That's because I'm going to have a big house that goes over all that stuff. And so from here, I've gone, let's just back it up. We've got 5 layers turned on. So I've got my base layer for the mountains, my highlight pass, just like we were talking about in that second video. Then I go into my shadow layer, then I do my highlights. And now I'm starting to work on the foreground, or sort of back middle ground. So this is a really big swath of land, multiple football fields that we're seeing in the distance here. How do I paint that and give it a sense of scale? Well, you'll see. So I'm starting to build in, I got a quick little highlight pass layer. Now I'm starting to go back and build a little bit of terrain in there. Let's zoom in on what those terrain marks look like. Again, I'm using my textured brush, working really far back, and just giving sort of impressionistic dots of the rocks that are there. Letting my textured brush give me that sort of sandy, rocky type shape that I'm looking for on the terrain. So as we start to zoom back within this piece, it starts to have that little bit of white noise to it, and it starts to look pretty realistic. From there, I'm getting into my sort of middle background, and then I've got the pit, which is going to be its own thing. I know that I need to slow down when I'm rendering the pit. That's going to have more intricate rendering to it. And at that point, I had done the background, I'd done the mountains, I'd done the sky, and I was like, okay, I feel myself getting into a rush. When my energy starts to wane at the end of a painting session, then I'll turn around and do something that's pretty easy, right? Like just blocking in the building. And oftentimes, be mindful of how much energy and how much focus you have on these illustrations. Because if you push it too far, you'll start to get into a rush. And I want it to be nice and fresh as I move into the foreground and start making these decisions that I'm going to show you guys tonight. But this is me blocking in the house now. And watch. Okay, pause, reset. Watch how much when I turn on this house, this shack structure, it drastically changes our interpretation of the composition. And where's the other one? Ah, there it is. Yeah, those two guys. Holy jam, right? So I feel as like an artist and a creative, that suddenly the way that we perceive this painting has drastically changed by adding in those really strong verticals and horizontals with this shack over on the right-hand side of the scene. It's not the same painting anymore once you add that much black to it. Now, I'm going to be moving forward towards the black. It's not going to stay this dark throughout the entire thing, but going back to that line work project, I hope that you guys are starting to get a feeling for how the balance of black and white affects our opinions and our feelings of a painting. So now that background in there is starting to look really crisp and really cool in comparison with the super dark cabin within the foreground. Now, there's a couple more things that I did with the cabin. We've got a few more layers to turn on here before we get into the painting session this evening. So the first one is I had it in me. I was like, okay, I've got this part done. I need to go ahead and color in the actual door or inside the cabin just to give to not lose all those objects. Right now, it just looks like a little tiny window. So I did, and I just blocked it in. I made it gray at first, and then I was like, okay, I've still got it in me. You know, I've got my first color shape, right? This is the reason why we want to go in and we want to do the blocking in of the shapes for any of these pieces that we're doing. From there, I can just hold down the control key, isolate this whole rectangle shape. I'll show you what shape I'm talking about here. Put a color overlay on it. This shape looks like a Tetris piece. And now I can hold down control, isolate that shape, and I can start painting over top of it. And now all of a sudden, by adding one quick little shadow pass in there, my room has got a lot of depth to it. And I haven't added any highlights in here yet. Haven't added any real lighting into this space. This is what it looks like with the line work off, so it's a little cleaner to be able to see. But over here on the right-hand side, you can see that we've got a floor, we've got a little bit of gradient with that ambient occlusion where the light, even if there's light coming in through the window, can't quite reach into the cracks. And then same thing as we get closer to the ceiling, the light can't quite reach in there. And then I went through and just started blocking in my shapes on the within the room. So I didn't forget about my chair and my table and my wastebasket and my little crumbled up piece of paper. Those guys are still in there, and I didn't want to forget about the window panes either. Now, what I've been trying to do is I know as I'm painting around this character that I've got very little real estate to be able to paint the ground. That's why the ground was so boring over here on the right-hand side. Is I'm trying to use these lines within the window from the ground to almost look like fast action movement lines. Thought that was a creative solution to show the exuberance in which this fella is standing up. So now, there he is. I've went and color blocked him in all the way. Got his full outline in there. He's only one color right now, but this is going to help me a lot moving forward to be able to shade his pants and just do everything a lot quicker. And it works best, you know, if you just go ahead and block in my opinion, the entire character, and then you can start working on top of it, especially when you have multiple characters like this, painting each one of them like they're a cardboard cutout first, and then going back and being able to do, you know, the shadow pass on all of the characters at the same time, and then being able to do the highlight pass on all of the characters at the same time, especially when they're in a big group like this. is a really, really smart, efficient way to work. And then you can decide, if this guy's got darker trousers on, you go back and you add some of the darker colors, like little fella down here in the lower left with his vest, dressed like Aladdin. He might have a darker vest on and a lighter colored shirt. So you add some color variation. And again, while you're adding those darker colors, we're constantly thinking about what is the rhythm of the patches of dark color that I'm creating. Is it visually interesting? A, does it work with, does it move the viewer's eye through that rhythm of dark colors well? The more you start thinking like that in terms of rhythm and pattern and repetition and shape language, the better these paintings are going to be. All right. And so that is where this painting stands now. We've gone from a well-developed sketch, figuring out the characters' clothing on them, um, painting through the background, painting through the middle background, and we're working our way towards the front. So the next thing that I want to go through and do is going to be the character's arm, the pit, getting some of those characters within the foreground blocked in as well. It's not the most exciting thing to look at in the entire world. For the most part, it's just going to be me quickly coloring in characters or going around the outline and doing that cardboard cutout type look that I just showed you on the character on the right-hand side. Oh my goodness. I've got a cat behind my Wacom screen right now with some that's throwing paws at my fingers every time I hit a hotkey. Okay, so let's get in and I want to show you guys. We've got the cabin and the background. And what I'm working in now, the cabin, they're separated out in the green layers over here on the right-hand side. I'm just going to create a new layer and start sort of sandwiching this stuff in between there. Now, I have been up until this point using and pulling my color space. I even pulled the dark colors for the cabin from the deep shadows within the mangled car piece of machinery in the reference image in the top left-hand side. I've got my cool arm sculpture down here. I could start pulling colors from that. However, I have a feeling, let's just look, that that is almost pure black right there. Whereas on my car reference, it's a little bit higher up. It's a little bit higher up. And so just to be able to match the atmospheric perspective and to be able to find that middle tone, I'm going to start somewhere here with the arm on the character. Yeah, I've still got my pit to try and figure out, but that'll make more sense once I get the arm shaded in. I want to do this in two parts to where the arm is a full layer, and then the knife becomes a second layer on top of the arm. And I think that'll be the easiest way for me to be able to paint both of these and get a really successful paint out of it. All right. So I've got smoothing turned on. My opacity right now is turned up to 100%. And we're going to start making some choices. One of the things that I'd mentioned previously was perhaps putting some armor on the character's arm. Forget about it. I don't think I'm going to do it. Just going to leave it bare. All right. Wow. Talk about color theory. That color of the character's arm changes so much between going over the ridge in the background. Notice how clean I'm keeping this line because this is the guiding outline for the rest of this thing. Wow, this arm goes down forever. And let's put some dirt piles. Got some dirty armpits right around him. Pile of rocks. Just to be able to give it a little bit better transition into the ground. Another pile of rocks. I'm going to paint right over my character. That's in the foreground because he's going to get his own stamp here in just a minute. Here's the shoulder for the character. Let's not forget that line. Looks like I don't have my pressure brush turned on. There we go. That's much better. So now we're getting a more successful line shape there. Again, this stuff's all going to disappear, but it's important for the rhythm of the painting. Got my ladder, that's going to get covered up as well. All that stuff's getting covered up on the edges and the sides. Up here at our arm. Trying to be very clean and intentional with these outline shapes that I'm creating here. There we go. And let's go in and let's get the hand. Looking nice and clean. Just being real considerate of my silhouette that I'm painting right now. There we go. Don't need to fill in any of the fingers because we're going to have the sword on its own layer right up underneath there. And fill that in. All that stuff filled. Sword. Yeah, I think we're good. Cool. And so really nice thin outline on the arm. To complete shape, select, modify, expand. We've done that many times. Double click. All right, big decision made. We've got the arm shaded in with something there. We've got a base color on it. Good. Now, I really like how I'm starting to introduce the secondary color for the loose dirt right behind the statue. So where these piles of dirt were at before, I'm just going to go in real quick. We haven't done our shadow layer yet. I'm just trying to give some slight separation. So where the dirt has been turned up and tilled, cool. Give that just a little bit of a different color. And now let's go in and we got to figure out our knife shape. I want the knife to be a slightly different color. It's going to have some good highlights and shading on it. We've got some good highlights and shading going on in my on this vehicle reference here. So let me pick this middle color just so that it's a slightly different color while we're painting. I'm going to create a new layer just on top of that. And then the same thing, I want to make sure that I'm getting my shapes really nice and clean. The only part that really matters to me is that outline, or sorry, the outer part of the line that I'm drawing, since I know I'm going to be filling all this stuff in. And this, you can see I've got all my inner lines. It looks like a flying saucer up on top. That's all cool. But it's really just the outer shape that you're interested in. And it's that simple. Once you've got this with your sketch, you don't have to keep on using those that line work, fellas. And let those lines go. I ain't lying. But this one, I probably could have just used the lasso tool, but that's okay. So that one's filled in. let's see here. Where else do we have Saber? Okay. Oh boy. So the underlying sketch started to confuse me just a little bit. Let's get rid of you. All right. There we go. It always works well for me. This is where we can start thinking about interesting sort of steps within the painting. And on the left-hand side, that was quite a bit higher, so I can make measurements and adjustments. There we go. A lot of this, that line that I just drew is going to end up being in shadow later on. Now I'm zooming really far out to be able to get another nice clean pull. Working really fast here, being like a pinstriper, but this is the 25% smoothing that really comes in handy. When I'm moving my hand that quick, Photoshop will go ahead and adjust it and try and make that brush line as smooth as possible. If you go really, really slow there and you don't make a confident line, then Photoshop's going to say, oh no, they're really trying to concentrate on this. We better wiggle it as much as we can. So working with speed when you have the smoothing on can help you fill that stuff. All right, there we go. Got my base color for the dagger. Select, modify, expand. It's on a different layer. And my next step on both the hand and the dagger is going to be a shadow pass. But we're in a good spot now to, before I do that shadow pass, I want to go in and start working on the pit. Okay, so when we look at, we don't really have too much lighting or shading established within this piece yet. Like when I look at the mountains in the background, there's not too much really that's giving it away. I guess the light's coming from the sort of the right-hand side because I've got this one strong highlight right here that's catching a lot of stuff. That's sort of on the right. So let's go in and let's assume that's how the lighting is working within the within the pit. Okay, so I'm just going to try to again grab sort of a middle gray here for my pit area. Looks like my pit was on that layer that I hid. Yeah, there's my pit. Okay. Back up, and the pit is going to be just behind the arm. And I'm guessing there's going to be a pretty big gradient that's going to run through it. So how should I approach this? I'm going to do the ground first, and then I'll start doing the walls. Ignoring all my little characters for now. And keeping that line going just so that I can fill it in quickly. So likely there's going to be some type of gradient that runs across this ground here. Got a ladder right there. Rough it up just a little bit. We still got a ground layer that we're going to end up painting. Oh, okay. Yeah, we're painting the ground on the pit. So that and a little bit of a ridge here. And this thing's confusing. Okay. Yeah, it's got terraces. Select, modify, expand, double click. All right, good. We got that out of the way. Now it's pretty light all right. So what I want to do next is let's figure out I'm using my dodge tool. And if we got the light coming into this thing, we're gonna let that side be just a little bit darker. Nope, nope, it can stay dark because we're gonna have the highlight on the arm over there. That's cool with me. Okay, next up, let's start doing the layer on top of that. Build the cake. Got a pretty good lighter gray that we just established, but we also have this nice light gray right here. So for the exposed dirt, maybe it's got a little bit more minerals going on in it. Start filling in some of those shapes. Man, I like my little truck over here. I wish he was he's going to be really right up next to the edge of the composition when I'm totally done with this, but that's okay. All right. I'm saying in the previous video at work that I got to visit the site of the terracotta warriors, the one where the emperor buried everyone that made the warriors like alive inside the mountain. Pretty crazy stuff. All right, so while I've got this thing selected here, I'm just going to just sort of set some intentional stuff. Create just a little bit of a burn there. Some lines going through this thing. Just to be able to help separate out um, the ground. Again, ambient occlusion, the shadows can't quite reach to the exact the ground area or right where corners are at. That's always a good spot for you to start. With your shadows. A little bit of separation. Cool. All right, that's working well for me. Got some of that going in there. This is going to be the brighter side. We still got a shadow pass to do on all this ground stuff over here, but this is where the light is actually hitting at. And let's go a little bit darker or a little bit lighter as we're moving up. So that we've got a big old ground plane here. I think we can do the ground just about the same color as this. I'm going to create a new layer just in case so that we're doing non-destructive editing. Got some fence posts there to keep everybody safe. Another, and then right behind that, another ground layer. So I'm just going to do these, even though they're on they're both flat, they're both horizontal. I'm going to do it on a separate layer. And this allows me to just very, very quickly with the burn tool start setting some intentions. I'm not going full dark. I'm doing it really, really light while I'm doing this, but this allows me just to be able to set some reminders for myself and to lightly start separating some of these spaces, just to be able to make that look like an actual ridge before I get to the highlights or anything else. All right. So next up, merge those two. And that without any problems. Now we've got that whole little ridge figured out. And you can see how even before I start drawing any kind of textured rocks within here, we're starting to get a general idea of the shape back there. And now we've got one more dark ridge that we're going to do. Just going to work behind at first, getting up to the foreground. There it goes. There's all kinds of fun stuff that I can do with the texture. This exposed rock right here. This is going to be on the back of the statue's arm. So with all of this, I know that on the back of the statue's arm, it's going to have a pretty good shadow back there. Looking at my reference image of the statue sticking up out of the beach. Real quick before I get out of here, just going to again make some choices, loose measurements around here, rocks, cracks, that type of thing. Okay. And let's switch over to the dodge real quick. Look for my dodge tool. As that gets closer to the top, we want to show the different layers of soil within there later on. But just that quickly, we've got a pretty complicated multi-tiered terrain that we've been able to create within this pit. And I'm not thinking too much about it. I'm just using the ambient occlusion to be able to very quickly go through and work in those planes and thinking about how it's going to work. Just like if you were painting a staircase, you know, this is just a big staircase is really all it is that I'm doing right now. All righty. So now we've got the shadowed side. We've got another ridge over here that this character is climbing out from. But back here is pretty well shadowed. And so we've got this whole section. I don't know if you can really see it with my eyedropper painted in red. I'm going to leave that guy a separate layer for now. Put violet for those guys. So this is a different one in red. So what I'm painting next is going to be this whole little section in here, that ridge. So that one's in shadow. So I can go ahead and pick. Let's start with my just normal ridge color, and then I'm going to use the burn tool very quickly and the dodge tool to lighten and darken this thing so it makes it look like it's in shadow, and trying to get a little bit closer to the that pile of dirt. One second, my screen just went out. Do. All right, back in business. Great. Sorry about that. So I've got my gray selected, got a new layer painted out. Go in and start filling in all this stuff right around here. You know, I could paint this in red to really be able to see what the heck is going on with all this stuff. And then change it to a color overlay. That's a lot of the pit right there. Cool. Glad I didn't try and do this last night. I'm doing it this evening while I'm fresh. But modify, expand. And with this dodge tool, I'm like I said before, second time, I'm just sort of making some reminders for myself. Come on now. So we want good and dark, catching some of the light down here. Want nice and dark right around. Whoa, that's why that was. I felt like it was lagging on me. Okay. I think we might be about to take a break here. My computer's got two mice that I'm seeing right now. Uh-oh. Yeah, the touch screen has turned back on. Okay. Cool. I think we're going to I need to turn the touch screen off. Let's pause this video for right here. I think that that gives you a good idea of how to be able to work through the background, how to be able to develop your sketch. I'm going to be going through and continue to color block things out. So in the next video, we should see a lot of the color blocking totally completed on the characters within the foreground. Probably the shadow pass started as well. And this painting will be well on its way. And we'll be starting to move into the detail pass soon enough. So thanks for checking this one out. Sorry for the technical difficulties right at the end, but I hope this was useful for you for how to be able to approach working from the very far back in your painting once you begin painting to the foreground and then continuing to use your black and white reference digital illustration for your color space. All right, till next time.